Save me 5 times a night." The giant widow begged through sobs, her powerful body trembling as the rancher knelt beside her, his hands tenderly freeing her from the trap. Cordelia Blackwell, a heartbreakingly beautiful 6'2" widow with curves that made men worship and strength that made them fear, reached up to touch Josiah Thorne's weathered face. "I've been alone since my husband died," the giant widow begged, her voice raw with loneliness and desire. "Men want to steal my land, but I'm dying inside from being untouched, unloved. Save me from them, and let me save you from your emptiness 5 times a night, every night." The rancher's breath caught as this magnificent giant widow begged him with eyes full of desperate hunger, and the rancher agreed, whispering, "I'll save you 5 times a night," even as his heart pounded with forbidden need. But the rancher agreed to something that would consume him, because saving the giant widow 5 times a night meant protecting her land at sunset and possessing her body at midnight, again at 2 a.m., again at dawn, until passion and bullets merged into one, and he collapsed. The giant widow begged, "Save me 5 times a night," and the rancher agreed until he collapsed from pleasure, exhaustion, and gunshot wounds. But the question that will make you weep: when the giant widow begged to be saved 5 times a night, and the rancher agreed until he collapsed bleeding in her arms, would their last words be, "I love you," or "goodbye"? The steel teeth of the bear trap had cut deep into Cora's calf, and blood pooled in the dust beneath her. Joe worked carefully, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle as he pried the jaws apart. She hissed in pain but never looked away from his face. Up close, she could see the lines etched around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the way his jaw clenched with concentration. He smelled like leather and horse, and something masculine that made her stomach flutter despite the agony in her leg. "They set this for you?" Joe asked, his voice rough as sandpaper. "The Garrison brothers. They've been terrorizing me since Jacob died 8 months ago." Cora's hand gripped his shoulder as he finally freed her leg. "Poisoned my well, stampeded my cattle, burned my fences. They want me desperate enough to sell my water rights for nothing." Her voice cracked. "Last week they left a note saying next time they'd take what they wanted by force." Joe looked up at her then, really looked at her, and Cora saw something flicker in those storm-gray eyes. Not pity. Understanding maybe. Recognition of someone else who'd been broken by life. "I can't pay you much," she whispered. 500 in gold is all I have left. But Mr. Thorne." She reached up and touched his face, feeling stubble rough against her palm. "I'm so alone. I'm so tired of being afraid. I need someone to protect me 5 times a night, check the property, make sure they're not coming, and I need—" Her voice dropped. "I need to feel alive again, to feel wanted, to feel like a woman and not just a target." Joe's breath hitched. His hand was still on her injured leg, warm through the fabric of her pants. "Ma'am, I don't think—" "Cora, my name is Cora." She pulled him closer, close enough that their faces were inches apart. "And I'm not asking you to think. I'm asking you to save me 5 times a night. Patrol my land at sunset, at midnight, at 2 in the morning, at 4, at dawn. And between those times," she let the words hang there, heavy with meaning. "Between those times, let me save you from whatever ghosts are haunting you. I see it in your eyes, Joe Thorne. You're as lonely as I am. You're as desperate to feel something real." The wind kicked up dust around them, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed. Joe stared at this woman, this magnificent, terrifying, beautiful woman who'd just offered him salvation and damnation in the same breath. His wife had been dead 3 years, his daughter even longer. He'd been living on whiskey and regret, waiting for the world to forget him completely. And here was Cora Blackwell, looking at him like he was the answer to a prayer she'd been too afraid to speak out loud. 5 times a night, he repeated slowly. 5 times a night, she confirmed. Save me from them. Let me save you from yourself. Joe lifted her in his arms. She was heavy with muscle and height, but he was stronger than he looked, and carried her toward the ranch house. Her arms wrapped around his neck, her face pressed against his shoulder, and he felt her tears soaking through his shirt. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "I'll save you 5 times a night, Cora Blackwell. But I need you to understand something." He stopped walking and looked down at her. "I'm a broken man. I lost everything that mattered. I've been half dead for 3 years just going through motions. If we do this, if I agree to this, I can't promise I won't break again. I can't promise I'm strong enough." Cora reached up and wiped the tears from her own face, leaving dust smears on her cheeks. "Then we'll be broken together, and maybe broken people can hold each other up long enough to become whole again." Joe carried her into the house, kicked the door shut behind them, and set her gently on the worn leather couch. The house smelled like sage and coffee and loneliness. It was clean but sparse, like Cora had been living here but not really living, just existing in the space between her husband's death and whatever came next. He knelt beside the couch and examined her leg. The wound was deep but clean. "I need to bandage this. You got medical supplies?" "Cabinet in the kitchen, top shelf." Her voice was steadier now, though her eyes still shimmered with unshed tears. Joe found the supplies and came back, kneeling between her legs to work on the injury. The intimacy of the position wasn't lost on either of them. His hands were gentle as he cleaned the wound, applied salve, wrapped it in clean white bandages. Cora watched his face the whole time, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the gentleness in hands that looked like they'd seen violence. "Thank you," she whispered when he finished. Joe looked up at her. "First patrol is at sunset. That's 2 hours from now. You should rest. Will you stay? Just sit with me. I haven't had anyone in this house since Jacob died. It's so quiet it makes me want to scream sometimes." Joe settled into the chair across from her, his hat in his hands. "I'll stay." They sat in silence for a while, the afternoon light slanting through the windows and painting everything gold. Outside, the ranch land stretched away toward distant red rock formations. It was beautiful country, worth fighting for, worth dying for, maybe. "Tell me about your wife," Cora said softly. Joe's jaw tightened. "Her name was Martha. She was small, delicate, everything you're not, laughed easy, loved hard. When the cholera came through, she went first, then Emma, our daughter, 6 years old with her mother's laugh." His voice went rough. "I buried them on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, I'd bought my first bottle of whiskey. Been drinking ever since, trying to forget what their screams sounded like when the fever took them." Cora's eyes filled with tears again. "I'm so sorry, Joe." "Tell me about Jacob." "He was a good man, strong, hard-working. We built this ranch from nothing, just the two of us, in a dream. I got pregnant 3 years into our marriage. We were so happy." Her voice cracked. "The baby came early, too early. He was perfect, so perfect, but his lungs. He never took a breath. We buried him under the cottonwood tree by the river, named him Samuel, even though he never lived long enough to hear it." She wiped her eyes. "Jacob went back to work in the mines to save money for us to try again. Cave-in on a Tuesday morning. They pulled his body out 3 days later." "I'm sorry, Cora. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Walking wounded, trying to survive in a world that keeps taking pieces of us." Joe stood and walked to the window, looking out at the land. "The Garrisons. Tell me about them." 3 brothers. Rance is the oldest, Means is a rattlesnake, Deke's the fast gun. Little Frank is 6'3" and strong as an ox, though there's nothing little about him. Their ranch is north of here, but they don't have year-round water. In summer, their cattle die of thirst, while mine drink their fill from the Snake River." She paused. "They made their first offer at Jacob's funeral. When I said no, things got ugly." "How ugly?" "Ugly enough that I'm offering my body to a stranger to make them stop." Joe turned back to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "You're not offering your body. You're offering partnership, protection for both of us. We save each other, remember?" Cora smiled, and it was the first real smile that had touched her face in months. "Partnership, then." The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Joe checked his revolver, made sure his rifle was loaded. "Sunset patrol. I'll be back in an hour." "Joe?" Cora's voice stopped him at the door. "Be careful, please." He looked back at her, this giant of a woman curled on the couch with her bandaged leg, and felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "I will. You rest. We've got a long night ahead of us." He stepped out into the dying light, and Cora listened to his boots crunch on the gravel path. For the first time in 8 months, she wasn't afraid of the coming darkness. For For the first time since Jacob died, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she might survive this, and if the price was opening her heart and her bed to a broken rancher who looked at her like she was worth saving, then maybe that wasn't a price at all. Maybe it was just two broken people finding a way to be whole again, 5 times a night, every night, until either the Garrisons were gone or they were dead. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to the empty room. Please let him come back to me. All 5 times. Please. Joe walked the north fence line as the sun bled into the horizon, his Winchester cradled in his arms like an old friend. The land was beautiful in that dying light, all golden grass and red rock formations that looked like they'd been carved by God's own hand. But beauty didn't mean safety. He'd learned that in the war when the prettiest meadows hid the deadliest ambushes. He found fresh horse tracks near the property line, 3 riders, maybe 4, circling like wolves testing for weakness. The Garrisons were watching, waiting for their moment. Joe memorized the tracks, the patterns, the way they'd approached from the west, where the canyon walls offered cover. When he returned to the ranch house an hour later, lamplight glowed warm in the windows. Cora had managed to stand despite her injured leg, and she'd made coffee strong enough to strip paint off a barn. The smell hit him when he walked through the door, coffee and something else, something feminine and inviting that made his pulse quicken. They've been here, he said, accepting the cup she offered. Fresh tracks. They're watching. Cora's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. Then they know you're here now. Good, let them know. Maybe they'll think twice. Joe sipped the coffee, felt it burn all the way down. You should sleep between patrols. I'll wake you if there's trouble. I can't sleep. Cora moved closer, limping slightly. I'm too aware you're here. Too aware that for the first time in months I'm not alone. She reached out and touched his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath her palm. Stay with me, Joe, just for a while. Let me feel alive again before the midnight patrol. Joe set down his coffee cup with trembling hands. The war between duty and desire raged in his eyes as this magnificent woman looked at him with desperate hunger. Cora, I don't know if I can... She kissed him, soft at first, then deeper, her hand sliding up to cup the back of his neck. Joe made a sound low in his throat, half protest, half surrender, and pulled her against him. She was tall enough that they fit together perfectly, her curves pressed against his hardness, her mouth opening under his like she'd been starving for this touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Joe rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything. I know, Cora whispered. Save me, Joe, the first time, right now. The midnight patrol found Joe exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with walking fence lines. His body hummed with the memory of Cora's skin, her gasps, the way she'd whispered his name like a prayer. But exhaustion made men careless, and careless men died in the West. He forced himself alert, scanning the darkness with eyes that wanted desperately to close. That's when he smelled them. Whiskey and unwashed bodies and horse sweat carried on the night wind. Joe dropped behind a boulder, rifle ready, counting shadows moving through the scrub brush. 4 men this time. The Garrisons had brought reinforcements. Thorne! Rance Garrison's voice cut through the darkness. We know you're out here, playing guard dog for the widow, but you can't watch forever. You gotta sleep sometime. Joe stayed silent, watching their positions. They were testing him, trying to draw him out. She must be something special, Deke called out, his voice slurred with drink. Paying a broken-down drunk to keep her warm at night. Tell us, Thorne, is she as wild as she looks? Rage flooded Joe's veins, hot and pure. His finger tightened on the trigger. 1 shot, 1 dead Garrison. But that would start a war he wasn't sure he could win tonight. Walk away, Joe called out instead. Last warning. Or what? Little Frank laughed. You'll shoot us all? You're 1 man, old-timer, 1 tired man. How many nights you think you can do this before you collapse? The truth in those words stung. Joe's shoulder ached. His legs felt like lead. Between the patrols and Cora's desperate need for connection, he'd had maybe 30 minutes of actual rest. How long could he keep this up? A week? 2? The Garrisons had time. He had only will. I held a bridge at Chattanooga against 300 cavalry, Joe said quietly. 4 drunk cowhands don't scare me much. Silence. Then the sound of horses retreating north. They'd come back, he knew that. But not tonight. Tonight, he'd won. Joe stumbled back to the ranch house at 1 in the morning, so tired he could barely see straight. Cora met him at the door wearing nothing but a thin nightgown, backlit by lamplight so her silhouette showed every curve. "Are you hurt?" "Just tired." He leaned against the doorframe. "They came, 4 of them, testing our defenses." "Did you—" "No, just words tonight. But they'll be back." Joe looked at her, this beautiful woman waiting for him in the doorway, like a dream he might wake from. "Cora, I need to rest, just for an hour before the 2 a.m. patrol. I can't—" She pulled him inside, led him to the couch. "Then rest. I'll wake you." "But you wanted—" The unspoken arrangement hung between them. 5 times a night, protection and passion intertwined. "I want you alive more than I want you in my bed," Cora said softly, stroking his hair as he collapsed onto the couch. "Sleep, Joe. I'll keep watch." But Joe couldn't sleep. Even with his eyes closed, he saw the garrison circling, heard their threats, felt the weight of responsibility crushing his chest. He'd agreed to save her 5 times a night. But what if he failed? What if his body gave out before the month ended? What if the garrisons came in force and he was too exhausted to fight? "I can't do this," he whispered into the darkness. Cora's hand found his in the dark. "You can. You're the strongest man I've ever known." "I'm not strong. I'm barely holding together." Joe's voice cracked. "Martha and Emma needed me and I couldn't save them." "What makes you think I can save you?" "Because you're here. Because you stayed. Because for the first time in 3 years, you're fighting for something instead of drowning in whiskey." Cora's thumb traced circles on his palm. "We save each other, remember? You're not alone in this, Joe Thorne." At 2 a.m., Joe forced himself up for the 3rd patrol. His body screamed protest, but he went anyway, checking the river approach where riders could come in quietly. The night was cold now, stars brilliant overhead, and he thought about how beautiful this land was. Worth dying for, maybe. Worth living for, too. When he returned at 3, Cora was waiting with hot coffee and gentle hands. She undressed him slowly, tenderly, washing the dust from his skin with a warm cloth. And when she led him to her bed for the 2nd time that night, it wasn't desperate anymore. It was gentle, reverent, like 2 broken people trying to heal each other one touch at a time. "I'm falling in love with you," Cora whispered against his chest afterward. "Is that crazy? We barely know each other." Joe kissed the top of her head. "If it's crazy, then we're both insane. Because I'm falling too." The 4 a.m. patrol found him stronger somehow, energized by her confession. Love. When had he last felt that word in his chest instead of just hearing it? Not since Martha. Not since he'd become half a man shuffling through half a life. But dawn was coming, and with it, the 5th patrol. And Joe could feel his body starting to fail. The dawn patrol should have been routine. Joe had done it 4 times already that night. Walked the perimeter, checked for threats, returned to Cora's arms. But exhaustion made men stupid, and stupid men died in the West. He stumbled over a rock he should have seen, caught himself against a fence post, felt his vision swim. How many hours had he slept? 2? 3? His body was running on pure will now, and will only carried a man so far. The sun was just breaking over the eastern ridge, painting everything gold and red when he saw them. Not 4 men this time, 8, maybe 10. The garrisons had brought an army. Joe's heart hammered against his ribs. He couldn't fight 10 men. He could barely stand. But Cora was back at the house, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, trusting him to keep her safe. He'd made a promise, 5 times a night. He'd completed 4 patrols, just 1 more, just this last one, and then he could rest. He fired 3 warning shots into the air, the signal they'd agreed on, and started running back toward the ranch house. Behind him, horses thundered, guns cracked. A bullet whistled past his ear so close he felt the heat of it. His legs pumped, lungs burning, vision tunneling. Just make it to the house. Just get to Cora. Just... The first bullet punched into his left shoulder and spun him sideways. He went down hard, tasted dust and copper blood. The second bullet grazed his ribs, white-hot agony that made him gasp. Joe tried to stand, couldn't, crawled instead toward the house that suddenly seemed miles away instead of yards. "Joe!" Cora's scream cut through the gunfire. She burst from the house with her rifle, limping on her injured leg but moving fast, firing at the advancing riders. She was magnificent, 6 feet 2 inches of pure fury and desperation, her nightgown billowing around her like angel wings, her face twisted with rage and terror. "Don't you dare die! Don't you dare leave me!" Joe tried to answer, but blood filled his mouth. The world was getting fuzzy at the edges, soft and distant. He'd been shot before in the war, knew what shock felt like, knew he was fading fast, but he couldn't fade. Not yet. Not when Cora needed him for the 5th patrol. He'd promised 5 times a night. He'd only done 4. Then Cora was there, dragging him behind a water trough, her hands pressing against his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me," she sobbed. "Please, Joe, please stay with me. I love you. I love you. Don't leave me alone again." 5th patrol, Joe managed through bloody lips. "Didn't finish. Forget the damn patrol." Cora's tears fell on his face. "You did enough. You saved me 4 times. That's enough." Promised 5. His vision was going dark now, peaceful and quiet. He could hear Martha's voice somewhere in that darkness, calling him home, and Emma laughing like she used to before the fever took her. It would be so easy to let go, to drift away to where the pain stopped. But Cora's hand gripped his face, forcing him to focus on her eyes. "You listen to me, Josiah Thorne. You don't get to die. You don't get to leave me after making me feel alive again. You don't get to make me fall in love with you and then abandon me like everyone else. You stay. You fight. You save me one more time by not dying in my arms." Through the haze, Joe heard more gunfire. Different guns. More riders coming fast. Cora raised her rifle to defend them both, prepared to die fighting if that's what it took. But the new voices weren't the garrisons. "Mrs. Blackwell, it's Sam Hendricks from town. We saw your signal flares." The town had come, drawn by the gunfire and Cora's earlier pleas for help that had fallen on deaf ears until now. They'd finally come. Sam Hendricks and 20 armed men from Socorro Springs, good men who'd been too afraid of the garrisons until they saw one woman and one rancher willing to stand and fight. The garrisons broke and ran. Rance took a bullet from Sam that knocked him from his saddle, dead before he hit the ground. Deke and Little Frank spurred their horses north, never to be seen in those parts again. The hired guns scattered like quail, disappearing into the morning light. But Joe barely heard any of it. He was sinking, drowning in darkness, Cora's voice the only lifeline keeping him tethered to the world. "Stay with me," she kept saying. "Stay, stay, stay." "I'm trying," he whispered. "Love you. Don't you dare say goodbye. Don't you make those your last words to me." Then hands were lifting him, carrying him into the house, laying him on Cora's bed. Someone, the doc from town probably, cut away his shirt, probed his wounds. Joe heard words like "too much blood and might not make it," and "miracle if he survives." But he also heard Cora's voice, steady now, commanding, "He'll survive. He's the strongest man I've ever known. He held a bridge at Chattanooga. He saved me 5 times in one night. He doesn't get to die now." The darkness took him then, complete and absolute. And in that darkness, Joe Thorne had a choice. He could follow Martha's voice to wherever she'd gone. He could drift away from the pain and exhaustion and responsibility. Or he could fight. Fight to get back to the woman who loved him. Fight to see tomorrow. Fight because broken people who'd found each other deserved a chance at happiness. Joe chose to fight. 6 weeks later, he woke to the smell of coffee and bacon and Cora's soft singing from the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the window. Birds sang outside. His shoulder ached like hell, and the doc said he'd carry that bullet for life. But he was alive. He was breathing. He was home. Cora appeared in the doorway, and the smile that broke across her face when she saw his open eyes was worth every bullet, every sleepless night, every moment of pain. "You came back to me. Promised 5 times a night," Joe croaked. "Only did 4 patrols. Owed you 1 more." She laughed and cried at the same time, climbing carefully into bed beside him. "You saved me more than 5 times, you stubborn fool. You saved my land, my life, my heart, my hope. You saved me too." Joe pulled her close with his good arm. "Made me want to live again." Outside, the ranch land stretched away under a Colorado sky so blue it hurt to look at. The house the Garrisons had burned was being rebuilt by men from town who'd finally found their courage. The cattle were back. The water still flowed, and two broken people had somehow made each other whole. "Marry me," Joe said, properly, in front of God and everyone. "Yes," Cora whispered. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The kiss they shared tasted like coffee and tears and second chances, like hope after despair, like love that had been earned through blood and bullets, and 5 desperate patrols through one endless night. 6 months later, they stood in the rebuilt ranch house, Cora's hand on her swelling belly, Joe's arm around her waist. The baby would come in spring, the doctor said. A second chance at the families they'd both lost, a promise that broken hearts could heal and broken people could become whole. 5 times a night, Cora said softly, looking at her husband. Joe smiled. 5 times a night, for the rest of our lives. They'd saved each other, and that was enough. If this story touched your heart, if you felt every bullet and every kiss, if you cried when Joe collapsed and cheered when he survived, then please hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story that will make you feel this deeply. We pour our hearts into every video, crafting tales of love and redemption that you won't find anywhere else. And tell us in the comments, what time is it where you are right now, and where in the world are you watching from? We love hearing from you, knowing that our stories reach hearts across the globe. Thank you for watching, thank you for feeling, and thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, remember, even broken people deserve love, and sometimes the greatest salvation comes from saving each other.